Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today we will be dealing with managing your finances, and I have Donal Horgan from HFS Accountants and his partner Sandra with us today, and Donal will lead off on the topic. As usual, we will have the chat box and the Q&A where you can type in your questions and we'll deal with them at the end. Donal will deal with any tax or revenue questions that arise during the presentation. So with that, I'd like to thank Donal and Sandra for being with us today. And Donal, take it away.
Okay, hello everybody. You're very welcome to Moonrath in County Laois. Donal Horgan here speaking, and thanks Emer for the introduction. We're here to talk about, I suppose the topic today is managing finance through the crisis, or managing your money through the crisis. So I'm going to go through a few slides and speak for maybe 25 minutes or 30 minutes. And then I'd appreciate if you have any questions there, if you'd like to pop them into the chat box there. And we'll come to them towards the end of the webinar today. Now, I do understand there's a little problem with the cameras or some of your screens, maybe because you're probably not seeing George Clooney looking back at you, and that's just the fault of the camera. Okay, anyway. Now, managing our finances through COVID-19, or managing our money through this crisis. It is, I think everyone is saying, it is unprecedented times, and we've never seen anything like what we've just experienced over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And unfortunately, it's beginning to look like this is going to last for quite a while to come. So I suppose it's very important that we get into the hard work of how can we cut our costs. And cutting costs is difficult. It requires hard work. Managing your cash flow is difficult and requires hard work. There is no magic wand to this. And I suppose we have to examine every aspect of our business and try and see where we can go and what we can do. And the one thing I suppose we cannot do is just sit in our hands and do nothing. No matter what the crisis is, there are things that we can do that will affect change and change in a positive way. And we want to look and be mindful of our business today and what business we want to have whenever this crisis ends. Because granted, we're in a crisis, but that crisis will end. We all know the sun will rise tomorrow. We all know things will improve. And whereas things might not come back to exactly what was normal yesterday, there will be a new normal, and we need to be ready for that new normal when that arrives. So forgive the waffle. We'll try not to waffle on too much. Now, I suppose we've all heard the phrases of the economists on the radio, and they talk about recessions and double dip recessions and U-shaped recoveries and all these kind of things. We like to keep it nice and simple. And a good definition in our view of what a recession is if you put your hand in your pocket and you find money there, well, things aren't so bad. What's difficult is when you put your hand in your pocket and there's no money there. That's when you have real problems. And that's why we say cash is king. You know, so long as we can get access to cash, maybe things aren't so bad. And everything we do, we've got to see how we can manage our money and get money to come into us rather than leave us. And we've got to explore every option that we can, whether it be through sales and generating online income, or looking at payment terms to suppliers, or looking at our fixed costs and moratoriums and so on. But we got to look at everything that we can do to affect change. Now I'm going to flick on a slide or two where I've got in yellow there a little profit and loss account. Now this is for a mythical business that doesn't exist. They're just figures thrown together. We've got a profit and loss account in yellow, and across in green we've got a cash flow. And we're looking at the 6-month periods, 2 3-month periods, Q1, January, February, March, and Q2, April, May, June. And we want to look at, you know, what is important in our business and what we can do about our business. And if we start at our sales line, I suppose, I mean, for a lot of us, what has happened in recent weeks is that our sales have fallen off a cliff, and it's very worrying But it's not the end of the world. We're all healthy, and thanks be to God, we hope we'll be healthy when the recovery comes back. And we've got to manage the problem of how do we get our business from where it is today to be able to avail of the upturn when it comes. Again, I suppose the amount of sales that we're going to be able to make in the immediate future is very uncertain. A lot of us, I suppose, aren't in what they call essential services. And a lot of us have seen maybe our physical shop or physical outlet to sell has probably stopped. Social distancing is making it very difficult to physically interact with customers. So it's presenting a huge set of problems for us. And I suppose the first thing we need to look at is what can we do to affect sales. And it's one thing I'm sure you've all come across the American person in over the years, and the Americans are great. They have a fantastic attitude towards sales, and it seems to be embedded in them. They must do it from school, because they have a great attitude about selling themselves or their product or service, and they don't have any inhibitions. Whereas I suppose in Ireland we tend to be a little, well, not as good at it, I suppose. But we need to work on sales, and you know, maybe today is the time to start looking at getting an online presence. And if we don't have an online presence, let's get one. If we have one, let's develop it and let's get better at it. Let's look at social media. You know, again, it's something that we probably scoffed at maybe 5 years ago, but it's a reality, and it's only going to become more and more important as the years go by. With our sales now, telemarketing, telesales, again, that was something that we probably didn't do in the past, but maybe now is the opportunity. Can we go out to corporate Ireland? You know, they've got boardrooms, meeting rooms, reception rooms, canteens, a little bit of art, a little bit of arts and craft. Maybe will enhance a kind of a sterile business environment, but let's get out there and sell. Piece of art can enhance not only the atmosphere of the place, but it's also an appreciating asset. It's an asset that will increase in value. So let's get on that and start selling. Difficult and all as it is. But look, if we can at least come to some sort of sense of what level of sales will we have, and what sort of sales, then I suppose then we're going to look at how much sales and how much money is going to come into us. So we got to look and be very careful to get our deposits in, not to give excessive credit terms, and not to give out excessive product without getting paid. So, you know, good and all as it is to win an order, it's much better getting paid. We need to be mindful that you don't complete a sale until you're paid. And cash coming in is going to be the lifeblood of our business over the coming months. Now, if we're selling physical product, I suppose I'm going to flick across into the cash flow. So our main cash that's going to come into us is going to come in as a result of those sales. A loan drawdown might, although it's maybe not in these times, but we want to look at the total amount of cash coming in, and then how do we spend it. And again, typically we'll spend a lot of our cash coming in will be spent on our suppliers of stock or materials. Now those commitments will probably decline naturally in the coming weeks because our sales have declined. But we need to look too at the levels of stock that we're carrying, and if our sales are falling, can we reduce the amount of stock that we're carrying? Can we return stock maybe to a supplier, or can we get extended payment terms considering the crisis that we're in? We also want to look at carrying stock and the variety of stock that we've got, and try and have as much of a variety as we possibly can to cast the net as wide as possible when it comes to possible potential sales. On our cost side then, of course, wages are huge, but we might park that one just for the moment, because there's a couple of slides later on in the presentation that will address sales directly, or rather staff costs directly. So on the next line down there on our payments is our computer costs. And again, a lot of us are paying out monthly standing orders maybe for software companies. You know, we've got to ask the question, do we need those costs? And if we don't need them, we need to be proactive, and we need to make the cuts. Rent, if we're renting shops, rent and rates are similar. They're huge costs on the business. And again, I don't know of any landlord out there that's going to knock on your door and ask, would you mind if you didn't pay me rent this month? That's not going to happen. But what we have to do is lift the phone and contact the landlord. It's again, I know I used the word before, unprecedented times that we're in. You know, the law might say you must pay rent on the first of the month or whatever it is. But, you know, the new reality is we got to be ensuring that our business is ready when the upturn happens in whatever number of weeks or months ahead that is. So contact the landlord. Let's put in an interim arrangement. Let's put in an arrangement that's acceptable to both sides that will cover this crisis period. And, you know, we can go to a new norm when that norm arrives. Again, the County Council have, I think they will be agreeable to a suspension of rates during the crisis. That's not been confirmed yet, but I think it's probably it's probably the situation that will happen. Our heat and light costs, property insurance costs. Again, with heat and light, most of that, if our physical workshop, if our shop has closed or ceased, then probably those costs will drop naturally. With insurance, again, we've got to look at every aspect of insurance. If we've no customers coming in, do we need public liability? If we've got a delivery van sitting idle, do we need insurance on that particular vehicle? We've got to look at everything that we're doing and every aspect of it and seeing, is there a way it can be cut back? So lift the phone, contact the insurance broker, and let's see what we can do about it. Again, if we tip down to the rest of the costs that are there, and these are only an example, you really need to sit down with your own set of accounts, or just sit down with a scrap of paper and take a half hour and think through your business and think through the different types of costs that you incur, and try and figure out what is an appropriate reduction in cost that you should target, and then put in a plan to make that target. But I suppose one thing I should have said from the outset is it's most unlikely you will find one big cost that you can just take out. Generally, in a cost-cutting exercise, it'll be a little bit from a lot of different places rather than one big piece. Now we're going to move down. Okay, we have the accountant listed there as well, and of course we all know we've got to pay the accountant. Isn't that right, Sandra? And Sandra's nodding at me here behind the screen. The revenue commissioners. The revenue commissioners obviously are an important cost and an important cash flow consideration. What revenue have told us and what revenue have said is that while they want all taxpayers to continue to file and pay as normal, they do appreciate the circumstances that we're in, and they have asked that all taxpayers would continue to file as best they can, and where it is impossible to file, as in the past times, to use best estimates. If there are payment problems or concerns, they want you to contact the Collector Generals and come to some arrangement with Revenue. Now, Revenue have said two things publicly. One is that they will not impose late interest penalties on any late payments. And secondly, they will not instigate any collection measures. So, for example, the dreaded sheriff will not be knocking at your door just because of a filing. Now, Revenue have talked about a 12-month warehousing of tax liabilities, which is, I suppose, a bit like the moratorium from the banks, whereby your debt will be recognised, but they won't be actively pursued. After Revenue Commissioners, then we have our banking commitments, and I suppose, you know, the banks do provide a very important function in society, and they will be needed more than ever to provide finance once this upturn comes, and hopefully that will come in the coming months. But for now, any loans that you have out there that have been impacted by COVID-19, there is a moratorium available, and that moratorium simply means that the payments due for the next 3 months can be effectively moved to the end of the loan. So if you've got a 3-year loan, take out these current 3 months and add them on to the end of the period of the loan. It will not affect your credit status in any way at all once it's done by agreement. And the banks have been very helpful, I would say, over the last couple of weeks in helping clients through. The banks have made representations to government to extend the 3-month period out to 6 months, and we await hearing whether that has been successful or not, although we would imagine government policy seems to be to try and give all help that it can. So we would expect that will be coming. Now, sorry, I'm just going to come back to this. Again, cash flow and cash flow measures and cost-cutting measures, there can be a huge timing gap or timing difference between the day you make an adjustment to a cost and the date you actually pay for that cost. So, you know, it's all well and good me telling you, oh gosh, your payments for stock is going to drop because your sales have stopped, but you're paying probably for your stock that you bought 6 or 8 weeks ago or 2 months ago. So, you know, your sales have stopped, but your stock purchases haven't. So timing can be a huge consideration in any of these matters, which is why we need our banks more and more, and it's why we need to go to government and to look at government and the various schemes that they've got, which is kind of the purpose of the next few slides. We're going to look at what help is out there for all our businesses. So there are 3 main areas, I suppose, that there is assistance out there for the small business person, and they will go in working capital, in the unemployment payment or the COVID-19 wage subsidies, and then finally we've got supports and vouchers. So we're going to look at all 3 in turn. Okay, so working capital. One, I mean, there are several, and I suppose at the outset I should say, again, we're only 6 or 7 weeks into this crisis. Government are working hard. The ECB is involved, which is the European Central Bank, the EU. There is an awful lot of schemes that are going to come online over the next few weeks. They're working through detail at the moment, so it's not possible to tell you exactly what the situation will be as the weeks unfold, but this here will give you an idea of those that are already in operation. But there are new schemes coming, and there is detail that's coming all the time. So we just got to keep up to date as best we can, because things are changing quite fast. But it does seem at the moment all governments, not just our own, but the ECB and the whole idea is to keep society running and keep society ticking over. And an important part of that is the financial system, and keeping this financial system working and keeping your business working, because it's important to everybody. So anyway, government supports on working capital. So the first one is a micro enterprise COVID-19 business loan up to a maximum of €50,000 from Microfinance Ireland. The scheme is basically runs over 3 years or 36 months, whereby the first 6 months are repayment free, and then you make the repayments over the next 30 months. The rate of interest is somewhere between 4 and 5.5%. Again, go to microfinanceIreland.ie and you'll find all the detail there if it's appropriate to you. The credit guarantee schemes are being run by the pillar banks, the AIB, Bank of Ireland and Ulster Bank, and they have loans of up to €1 million over 7 years. Then the SBCI, which is the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, that's a government agency, I suppose, that have working through the commercial banks, have made available capital that can be invested in your business. So the loan amounts rise from 25,000 up to 1.5 million, and the first $500,000 is totally unsecured and subject to a 4% interest. And again, go online and have a look at sbci.gov.ie and you'll find loads of detail there. Also, any of the banks, again, Bank of Ireland, Ulster Bank, AIB and KBC are involved in the next one there. That's the Future Growth Loan Scheme that quite recently an extra 200 million was added. So that 200 million is just distributed by the 4 banks out to their clients, and it's a way of injecting money into the economy, again, which is what government seem to be anxious to do. The Sustaining Enterprise Fund, it's a new 180 million fund operated through Enterprise Ireland. Now, Enterprise Ireland are kind of earmarked towards the larger, I suppose, the companies with 10 or more employees, where there's a viable business, where they have an export element or an element of their business that suppresses an import. I suppose that's the best way I can use to put it. But they have loans of up to €800,000 each. And then there is the Pandemic Stability or Stabilisation and Recovery Fund. And this fund is over €2 billion and will make capital available to medium and large enterprises on a commercial basis. Now, in terms of our wages or wage subsidy schemes, I'm sure you've probably all heard of the COVID-19 scheme that was introduced on the 26th of March. It was to run initially for 12 weeks, and they are talking, and I think it's almost guaranteed that the scheme will be will run for further than 12 weeks, will be extended. We don't know for how long, and we don't know how much. So the current payment is up to 350 and up to 410 with the subsidy payment. We're not sure will that continue or whether that will be curtailed a little bit when they extend. And again, just keep your ears on the news. That information will come as soon as the decision is made by government. From the 4th of May, the COVID-19 scheme ran into what they call the full operational phase for employers. So the main criteria to avail of this scheme is that your sales have seen a 25% reduction in Q2 over Q1. Now, I think the wording says that 25% in expected sales. So that's a vague enough term. So most should be able to meet that criteria. The scheme is for a weekly payment of €350. 70% is repaid back to the employer. There is a top-up available, 30% of which is optional. There are some conditions for the employer to qualify, but as I say, the main one is the 25% reduction in Q2 sales over Q1. Now, the individual employee may do better than the 350 in terms of net pay, because there can be an element of tax back that would come through the payroll, so they actually might get more than the headline figure of 350. The second big scheme that's out there for the employed or self-employed is the pandemic unemployment payment, and this is for people who have lost their incomes or lost their jobs, and government have reacted quite quickly. There's a very simple one-page application form to apply for this, and it's processed quite speedily. In our experience, it's kind of 2 or 3 days, and the application gets approved. So everybody, be they employed or self-employed, but you know, everybody should be on one of those 2 schemes. Now, the next batch of arrangements are what we call the grant supports and vouchers. So the business continuity voucher from the local enterprise office, this is for businesses of up to 50 employees, and it's a £2.5 voucher for consultancy costs for COVID-19 strategy. So this could be, it's a voucher now, so they don't give you the money, but they will give you a voucher that you can use to buy services off maybe a solicitor or maybe a marketing expert or an IT consultancy guy. But so long as the work done, the consultancy work done, is to build a strategy for you and your business to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, then you will qualify for the voucher. General grant supports, okay, there's a huge number of schemes out there. Enterprise Ireland, the IDA, the local enterprise office, Udaros na Gaeltachta, and all government is there to help support businesses. It's looking to ramp up our online trading activity, reconfigure business models, diversify markets. All of these things would be good things to do in the good times, but they're particularly, I suppose, important as we're probably looking at a couple of bad weeks ahead. So anything we can do to develop our businesses, give us an online trading and make us leaner and meaner. Let's get new markets, new customers. All of these things will help the wider economy recover from this pandemic. The grant supports then trading online voucher. A lot of you will be familiar with this one. This is to help set up. This is for people that I think have not had an online presence to date, and it helps them get up and running and give them an online trading presence. The online retail scheme, as a 2 million scheme, again through Enterprise Ireland. It's between 10 and 40,000 available for the indigenous retail sector who already had a pre-existing online presence. And then the third one there is the COVID-19 Business Financial Planning Grant. Again, similar to the top one, it's to develop a financial plan for the larger guys. This is for companies that have more than 10 employees. Now, I would stress all of these schemes, all of these deals are all available online. Get on Google, go into the various government websites. They will direct you there fairly quickly. And the thing is, knock on the door, go and ask for these things, because the help is there. And if you don't ask, somebody else will. So knock on the door. The worst thing that can happen is they can say no. Grant support and vouchers, the Lean Business Improvement Voucher. Again, this is one, again, through Enterprise Ireland, Nuaidh na Gaeltachta. Clients can access up to 2,500 in training and advisory services. And training and mentoring through the local enterprise office all throughout the country. There's a lot of workshops. They have fantastic networking capabilities. And again, these services are there, and they're there for you. I mean, you're paying for them through your taxes. So now is the time to avail of them, and avail of the knowledge that is in the local enterprise offices throughout the country. Now I have no idea how I'm doing on time. How am I doing on time, Sam? So I suppose if I was to summarize the last few slides, the first thing I would be saying is, how can we generate revenue? That's the be end and the end all. Anything we can do to develop sales, be it new customers, new products, new services, a new way to deliver those services, anything that we can do will help sustain the business through these difficult times. Our costs, they're not going to curb themselves. So we got to work at it, and it's hard work, and it's repetitive work, and looking at costs and scaling back on costs is something that you have to work on day after day after day. And that's really, I suppose, what we would be asking you to do. Look at your business, look at every aspect of the business, and try to make sure that that business is there for you when things return to normal. And please God, that will be in the coming weeks rather than the coming months, although it's looking fairly grim right now. So again, Emer, how are we doing on time? Are we?
Yeah, no, that's great. Emer's internet has actually dropped, so she's disappeared. Yeah.
Oh, Mary.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just asking if anybody has any questions, if they'd like to type them into the chat box or the question and answer box. There's just one question in here about, do you know the way you were saying that employees receive the COVID payments, but
yes,
they won't have to pay tax at the moment? So what will happen with that after? Do you think they should put that aside? Will they have to pay that tax back later?
Yes. Yes. The employee will receive the 350 and it will not be subject to PAYE at the moment. Revenue will, at the end of the tax year, everyone is subject to income tax, and there is potentially a liability. I suppose if you take the practical side of it, for the current few weeks that they're on the unemployment payment, they're not in receipt of any other income, and therefore their tax credits should largely take care of the pandemic payment, but it won't take care of it in its entirety. So the individual employee may have a tax liability depending on how the rest of the year goes, and depending on their other income situation, they may have an income tax liability at the end of the year. And what we would suggest that they do is they change their tax credits to the week one, month one basis, so that they don't avail of the benefit of not having a taxable income during these current weeks.
Right.
But it is likely that the employee will have a tax liability at the end of the period. How much they should put by is very much dependent on what their total tax situation is and what their other incomes are, if any.
Okay, thanks for that, Donal.
Now, there is also, I suppose, during the processing of payroll right now, maybe the thing to do is switch off, or rather contact revenue and have your tax credits turned on to the week one basis now, which will mean you don't overly benefit by a tax refund in these weeks, which will lead to an increased tax liability at the end of the tax year.
All right, okay.
But again, everyone's tax is individual to them, and revenue won't allow an employer make any decision based on the employee's tax credits because it's private to them. So it's a difficult one, and I'm sure there's a lot of employers out there that will be a little bit worried by it, because the employee will be used to the employer looking after their tax affairs through the PAYE system, and the employee won't be used to having a tax liability at the end of a tax year. So it might lead to a little difficulty down the road.
Will they have to do that individually, or will their employer look after that when it comes to the end of the tax year?
Well, again, we've never had this before, so I can't say for sure. But in general, what would happen up to now was that the employee would run what's called a balancing statement. And the balancing statement would be ran by revenue, which would just simply roll up their income from all sources and apply a tax calculation to it, and would then deduct any tax already paid. So I would imagine that's what will happen, that there will be a balancing statement done for all employees. A balancing statement is, I suppose, similar to a P60, where you have one or more employments or one or more sources of income. So we would roll up any social welfare payments along with any wages that you might have during the tax year.
Okay. Okay, there's another question here. Do you have any recommendation for new businesses in terms of registration or revenue related?
Well, yes, I suppose the first thing to do is register. All businesses, all new businesses are, I suppose, under law, they're required to register. Registering has kind of no negative, there's no negative end to it. Except that once you register with revenue, if you only register for one day, in other words, if you were to register today and deregister tomorrow, the implication will be you must do an income tax return for that tax year, even though you might have only been registered for one day of it. So if I register today and I deregister tomorrow, there will be a requirement on me to file a 2020 income tax return with revenue during 2021. But I suppose that it's other than that, there's no great downside to registering. All you're doing is advising revenue that you have a source of income outside of the PAYE system.
Okay, that's great. It seems to have gone quiet there now. You must have covered everything, Donal, because there doesn't seem to be any more questions there now.
I hope I haven't put them all to sleep.
Yeah, no, you're grand. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much for that. If people do want to ask questions after, is it okay, Donal, to share your presentation and to?
Oh, by all means, Mary. Yes, of course, yes.
Okay, well, I can send out to everybody who was at the webinar today. So thanks for that, Donal, and we'll be in touch again. And thanks everybody.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.